Hello, hello, hello. This is the second episode of Pragmatic Humanists Thinkers with me, Vitaly Sharavatov, Pasha Finkelstein, and our guest, Vladimir. I can't remember your surname, sorry, Ivanov.
Yay!
Hello,
By the
Vladimir.
way, our Twitter handles are completely cut out.
Oh, all right. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's
Vladimir,
fine.
can you introduce yourself?
Hi, so my name is Vladimir. I'm a solution architect and senior engineering manager at Tinkoff Bank. But okay, I'm drawing rectangles, managing people, and continuously learning. I have a blog on solution architecture, but I'll leave it in the comments down below.
Good. So you're managing rectangles and drawing people.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, and today we are talking on time. I think that many new joiners to the management world start thinking about how to manage time of their employees and think that the time is the constraint if we talk from the theory of constraint perspective, which is, to my opinion, a bit weird and a bit wrong. What do you think, Pasha?
I think that as every good developer, I tend to say it depends. Sometimes time is constrained. Sometimes we can't really change external world. Sometimes we can't change our management in an instant. So yeah, if I'm a new team lead and my management already has plans, I have to, I have to consider them as constraints, but also at the same time, I should try to manage my managers to remove these time constraints in the future. But yeah, sometimes we just have to, because life is sometimes life is hard. Sometimes we
Complicated.
should do tough things, things we don't
Vladimir,
like.
what's your take on this?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think that we cannot manage time because it just flows. So we can manage, yeah, we can manage ourselves according to that time, so schedule and so on. So this is the first one. The second one, we don't need to manage, the time of our employees. My take is that we need to encourage people to make the work and find the best work for them to do, or search for a better place for a person. And if you have your people motivated, free, and interested in the work, you can do everything.
Mhm.
Yeah, but what do you think about? I have such an example on top of my head. We have, my management have ordered advertisements at federal TV channel, and it has a fixed, start date. Like we should start rolling it out like September 1st, for example, just for example. And now, and we already have scenario for this advertisement because it takes a long time to film it, and also we know that currently we don't have feature implemented, uh, um, feature that we promise in this advertisement to be implemented. It's not implemented yet. It's absolutely a management fail, absolutely. It's nothing to argue here, nothing to argue here about. But I'm a newcomer, I'm a new team lead, and what should I do? For me, it sounds like a hard time constraint. I should try hard to fit in it, because otherwise I would look like a bad manager.
Well, so we're talking managing expectations here, right? So you just go to your boss and say, hey, so I understand the situation, so I accept the time constraint. We will try to make the best for it. However, there are risks, and the risks are the following. So we're not fitting the timeline, and so on and so on. So nobody is a magician here, right? So
Yep.
we might put all our best effort into making the deadline. However, the risks are there, and we need a backup plan on what do we do, and let's avoid the situation in the future.
Mhm.
We all know
I
that it's impossible to roll back the promised TV ads, right? And uh, our legislator.
I think it's possible. Like that the gaming studios, they always postpone their gaming releases. Everybody's angry, but it's fine. So
And
But
there
they
is
usually
also
don't do TV ads.
there is also a
I'm talking
strategy.
specifically. Excuse me.
Mhm. There is also a strategy of doing two different advertisements for the TV. One with less functionality added, so it's a high risk strategy, and one with all the functionality added. So you can leverage the risk from that side as well, even
Yeah,
given
but
that the constraint is external.
it sounds extremely expensive because filming advertisements itself is extremely expensive. I actually don't know why. I don't understand this market. I just was told that it's extremely expensive thing to film an ad. Uh,
Yeah, I know. I know. For example, I have
well,
an example.
it's
Okay,
yeah,
go ahead,
not
Walter.
only the ad, but actually you have to pay for the advertisement on the TV channel, and there's a queue for
Mhm.
other companies. So yeah, it's expensive.
Yeah. And again, we are talking about quite an edge case, I would say, because not many
yeah,
companies actually afford themselves to have a TV ads.
yeah,
If you
absolutely.
go for PepsiCo or Coca-Cola, of course, they have Beyonce and whoever dancing in their ads. Yes, they must take care of all the risks possible, and they must be aware what functionality will be there when they launch the campaign. And again, this is the edge, the edgiest edge case, I would say, in our world. But this is the very first analogy that every single team lead brings when he is questioned, like, why do you have deadlines, let's say? Because we have TV ads. No, you don't.
Well,
Most of the
I
companies
believe
don't.
what people say is because my manager said me that we should do it to the certain time. I'm not sure, and we usually even don't know where did our managers get this date. I think it's just something. Yeah,
Mhm.
maybe it was promised, but by somebody. When you work at Sberbank in Russia, it's usually uh, German Gref said something about just to very wide audience. We will have this functionality in half a year. He says,
Mhm.
okay, and now all the Sberbank tries to fit into these deadlines because, of course, it's barely possible. Okay, it's
Yeah.
possible, but barely possible.
And I think the root of this problem lies in the way how the companies are structured. There is this good theory that I brought into chat recently, agent principle theory, whereas there is someone who owns the company and he employs CEO, CTO, all the C-level guys, and he distrusts them. So basically, they must promise him something, and that is the way how he or she measures their success. Did they hit the sales uprising mark of some sort? Did they hit, I don't know, some deadlines in terms of some functionality? Because as Vladimir said, even the gamers who are really keen on getting the new releases, they struggle. They want the releases as early as possible, and yet
Well,
they are happy to get it when it's done.
uh, I should say that the gaming industry is extreme. It sounds like extremely bad example because they're famous for their crunches, and their crunches could long for literally months.
And
It's
years sometimes.
like 16 hours a day of work.
Mhm,
Of course,
mhm.
they're extremely ineffective. I mean, I'm not even sure that they're doing something for this 16 hours.
Exactly. And that's the opposite side, the bad side, I would say, of working with time constraint. Because if your constraint is time, you're naturally trying to limit yourself to make sure you hit this deadline, you make it till the deadline. And so that we intuitively think if we work more hours a day, we would have better outcome, which is absolutely not, because there are many different takes from different sciences like
Oh,
neurophysiology,
by the
etc.
way,
Yeah.
thank you for reminding this
Mhm,
about this topic because um we had internal research at JetBrains. we
mhm,
we are gathering statistics from our users from those of them who agreed to send statistics.
Hmm.
It's a huge number of people, like maybe hundreds of thousands people, and median time of typing a day in their ID in our IDs is like 2 or maybe 2.5 hours a day.
Hmm.
All other all other time they don't they really don't I mean,
They're
at
not
least
typing. Hmm.
I mean, it's time of their ID being active window.
Hmm.
Of course they're typing for like 30
Even
minutes a
less.
day, or maybe
Yes.
even 20, maybe even 20
Hmm.
minutes a day.
Which makes me think that it is true that our, like, mostly our work as developers is gaining information, gathering information, processing information, analyzing and synthesizing some new information. I don't know, a solution proposal or a draft of a feature or something else, and only then executing the coding itself. So that
Yeah, of course.
if we see a manager who is trying to look how much time his or her developers are actually working, he will be focusing on working, and he will mean typing rather than doing anything else, which is really, really sad because I mean, I don't type much and yet I'm quite
Yeah, of
effective
course.
at my job.
Yeah,
And
of course.
mhm.
So our let's return to our original question. Was it if time is a constraint? But sometimes, I mean, we tend to set up deadlines, like virtual soft deadlines, not hard deadlines, just because we believe that it will lead to more controllable result. Like we will have something at the end of this soft deadline. Of course, if it's failed, we can just move this task, and we all know that we can. But there is such a thing which is that is called motivational equation, and expectancy, like uh, how, how we expect how much time will it take for us to process the task. The bigger is expectancy, the lower is motivation.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm not sure about the correct English word.
It makes sense. What I wanted also to add here is that when we set any deadline for ourselves, we think that we will be able to force ourselves to work more productively during this limited period of time, which is not the case. I mean, even with hormones, with mood, with everything else, with our situation in the country or in the family, anywhere, we are really, really influenced by all these factors, which means that we can try, we can do our best trying to force ourselves to work productively, and yet if our mental, let's say, capacity doesn't allow this work to be focused and productive, we won't be able to be productive. So that we are
But
doing a bad job here.
sounds like we should set deadlines for ourselves just to find what is our maximum capacity. Correct?
I don't really think so. No, I think that we should avoid setting deadlines in every possible scenario. If we can avoid them, I think we should, just because there is a good concept in psychology of intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation only happens when you have good conditions for it. Like you have fresh air, let's say, if we talk about physiology, you have fresh air, you're
Yeah.
well rested, you have something to drink, you have something to eat. If you're hungry, your brain is getting less energy from your body. You are less likely to be productive anyway. So you, as a manager of your own work, I think should focus on providing conditions for yourself to work. So rest more, have more slack at work between features, go play music, go play sports, go have a walk outside somewhere, so that when you actually sit by the computer trying to focus on work, you have all your mental capacity available for you to manage and to work with.
But here you're saying something like external motivation is not that important. Do you really believe this?
I would say that it is important, but I think that the work is much more efficient when you have higher intrinsic motivation than the extrinsic motivation. There is of course, like if you're really hungry, you must work. You must earn money to get food for you and your family. Yes, it will
Yeah,
work. You will force yourself.
it's intrinsic motivation because
Hmm.
our willingness to care is something
Hmm.
intrinsic.
Okay.
But,
Okay.
so it's not fair example, but
Hmm.
I believe, what if there are no interesting tasks for me in current backlog? There are some, but they're not too high priority, and I should do something else.
I tend to think that there is a very interesting and peculiar puzzle here. Interesting has a very strong and strange connotation of you considering always considering a certain task interesting or not interesting. But then again, I have sometimes a mood for some routine work, like okay, do some detailing of my post or proofreading it or doing something else, and then at some time a day I can do some inventive stuff. So if I am a manager of my work, I can find rationally think of myself, and I can find time where I'm more motivated to do a certain type of work. And also, if you're talking just about the backlog, I think that the amount of information about each single task you have, if it's high, if it's enough for you to understand the value for the client, and if you work for a company that you generally like, then you would have like there is a higher possibility that you will have good intrinsic motivation to work on this task, even if it would be considered not interesting for you in a different scenario, in a different company. There are lots of cases where people join companies just for money. Let's say you brought Sberbank example, for example. It pays a lot. It pays a lot, seriously, even twice more than other companies sometimes. And people do come there, and then they burn out just because everything is uninteresting, because managers do a bad job there, or something else happens. So the guys are only motivated by money, and it is really hard for us, being quite strange, irrational creatures, to motivate ourselves properly. If I tell myself, Vitaly, you must be motivated, you work, you work, you work, it will work for some period of time, but then I will just burn out.
Yeah, of course, but you know, there are some kinds of tasks I really don't like.
Mm.
For example, I don't like to create CSS styles for web pages. I
Mhm.
just hate CSS. It's
Mhm.
extremely complex for me. It's boring for me. I should read everything, every bit of documentation again because I forget everything. Well, I mean, I'm not fluent in CSS. It's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with CSS. There are
Mhm.
lots of talented people, but sometimes I should just do this job
Mhm.
because I believe that everybody should do the job they should do. There is no those specialization things. I don't believe in backend developers, front end developers, mobile developers. If you need to create application, you should go and create application. And sometimes you don't like some parts of this. Well,
Mhm.
it may be boring because you performed such a task lots of times, and
Mhm.
it may be boring because it's very hard for you, like this CSS example for me.
Technologically hard, yes.
Yeah, technology. For me, it's even not CSS is technologically is very simple thing,
Yeah.
but it's
Designed badly.
it has very high cognitive complexity.
Agreed. Yeah, it's designed badly. I don't think. Again, this is a spin-off, but I fully agree with you here, because I think that CSS doesn't map properly to our brains somehow. I mean, I've been doing CSS for 10 years alongside with JavaScript, or even more. So I did a very good job there, but still I hated it. And anyway, what I'm saying is that there is, of course, a routine kind of a job every single time. Like if I go to a gym, I warm up. I hate doing warm ups. Seriously, it's the most stupid thing in the gym that I have. And yet I know that I must do it in order to enjoy the weightlifting session later, because otherwise I increase the risk. So I'm trying to rationalize. Of course, you can rationalize somehow, somewhat, to a certain extent, the work you're doing. But again, it's always a balance. And if you're trying to rationalize and enforce certain type of work upon yourself for a long period of time, you're going to be bored. You're going to be thinking either of delegating it to someone, like, okay, do this boring stuff for me, or just leaving the job. You just can't be productive all the time trying to force yourself. That's why I have this idea that I must love my job. If I love what I do, then there is a great intrinsic motivation, doing pretty much everything, even if it's routine sometimes.
Yeah, but it's hard to get the motivation for doing such tasks. I mean, okay, for you in gym, it's absolutely valid example, but it basically won't work for me in CSS because I always feel this thing that somebody else should do this work. I hate this. Uh, I hate this, and I won't do it. You know, it won't be
You don't
beautiful
want to
at
do
the
it,
end
yeah.
of the day.
Hmm.
Yeah. So and it actually kills my motivation. Really
Hmm.
kills.
Hmm.
I love JavaScript. It's I know it's unusual for Java developers or backend developers to love JavaScript, but I love JavaScript and TypeScript and
Hmm.
all those kinds of things for front end, but not
Hmm.
CSS. And I'm constantly frustrated doing CSS work, and
But
I'm not
is
sure
there?
that something but deadline could really create a motivation for me. And so
That is interesting.
maybe, just
Mhm.
maybe, if my boss would say me, Pasha, you have 2 days to complete this task, maybe it will work at least for some time.
I think, yeah, I think you're right that there is no that the situation we're discussing is not binary, like either intrinsic or extrinsic motivation. Of course, there are things that we force ourselves to do. Brush the teeth for many for many people is forced from the childhood, and I never saw a kid who wanted to brush the teeth, and yet we follow this ritual and we get used to it. So there is also that we can get used to something, some routine, like brushing teeth on or shaving. I hate shaving, and yet I have to do it every month,
Actually,
let's say.
I
Yeah.
think that maybe Volodya is trying to join, isn't he?
Um, no, I can't
No,
see him.
okay,
No,
okay. I'm sorry.
no,
Please,
it's all right.
please continue.
So yeah, there are routine things that we get used to it as well. There is also quite a huge. Vladimir is back. There's also
Yeah,
quite a huge field of science. I think it's part of psychology where they talk about habits, how they actually get created, and how we can force habits upon ourselves. Like, for example, there is a bad habit of smoking. I smoke. And
Yeah,
so I know from the scientific point of view how to get rid of it. I know the tricks that actually people use to get rid of this habit and to replace it with something else, and then get rid of the replacement as well. And yet, I'm not following that, even though I think I'm quite a rational person. Yeah. So, Vladimir, we're talking about forcing ourselves to do something at work, about
yeah,
rationalization of intrinsic and extrinsic
yeah, yeah,
motivation.
yeah, yeah. I actually wanted to add a bit about, you were talking about CSS,
Hmm.
and well, first of all, I don't agree that CSS is not designed to fit our mental model.
Hmm.
Like, I managed to teach my wife, who is learning to become a UI UX designer, to
Hmm.
do some CSS from the perspective of Flexbox, and she
mm,
managed to comprehend that quite well and rather quickly. So
But that's Flexbox. That's Flexbox. It's quite new to CSS. The CSS had the very concept, the very basic concept of the flow. You remember that, and that was
yeah,
to me very hard to comprehend and to understand
okay.
why we have a different medium.
Yeah, okay, yeah. The second thing is that I would partially agree that CSS being like a whole thing is a bit complex. And this book drive, it mentions oh no, not the book, but a course of learning how to learn. It mentions this problem of when you try to force you to learn something new or use something that you're not used to.
Mhm.
You have this defense from your brain, Like it doesn't want to spend energy on something
Yeah.
complex. So you need to trick it to start working on it.
Hmm.
And thus the Pomodoro technique, because like, just start, spend like 5 minutes. And once you break this initial defense, it becomes easier and easier, and you're just
And you
continuing.
reward yourself as well. You have to
Yeah,
reward
yes,
yourself
yes,
with
yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah. The reward system works here,
Mhm.
like dopamine actually works, but
Yeah.
yeah. So it says, yeah, you managed to do that, so
You're good.
looks
Yeah.
fine. Let's
Yeah.
continue. Yeah,
For me,
yeah,
actually, Pomodoro is the only thing which allows me to write text consistently. Otherwise,
Mm,
I start text and I can never finish.
mm.
I just can't finish them.
Oh, you
It's
mean
extremely.
you switch to chats?
Yeah,
No.
I'm trying to
Mm.
procrastinate
Procrastinate.
as
Hmm.
much as I can. For me, writing text, I mean, it's supposed that it's considered that I'm writing relatively good texts. People
Hmm.
like them and so on. My boss like them, my peers like them, but I can't really force myself to write this text in any way but Pomodoro technique. It's the
Mm.
first time in my life when some technique actually helped me, some
That's
motivation, or
interesting.
I don't know. Is it
yeah,
considered
yeah.
to be a
That's
motivation technique?
great. There's a person, Don Felker, I believe his name is, and he's a consultant for like more than 20 years, and he's rather successful. So from my perspective, and he says that the only thing that helps him to like do all the things that he does, like his work, his trainings, I mean physical trainings, he's writing the books, developing the courses, and all the other stuff that he makes. So the only thing that helps him is discipline. He just has the strict schedule, like get up at 5 a.m., go for the training, then start working for 2 hours, then a break, then another working session, and so on. And he says, like, without it, I can't do shit. Like,
It's very interesting that you mentioned discipline. I think that discipline is a form of a ritual, and ritual has almost nothing to do with highly cognitive intensive work. Because if you need to invent something, you only limit yourself to, like in inventing new something, you limit your inventing time to like 1 day or 2 days, and there you do whatever you want. Otherwise, if you have like 1 hour for invention, 1 hour for the gym, 1 hour for invention, 1 hour for the gym, you won't be able to actually be productive there. Because rituals are very good for repetitive tasks. And if you're a consultant for 20 years and you've been teaching people pretty much the same things year and year and year, like a year after year, I think it's almost a routine for you and you can do it in a disciplined way. Don't you think so?
well, I definitely agree that discipline doesn't help with creative work, because
Hmm.
you need to switch context and so on. And in this course that we were talking about previously, there are a lot of examples of creative people that were actually working like 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day, maybe less, but they were spending a lot of time like walking around, doing something else, just because they know or knew somehow that your brain works in background a lot.
Yeah.
And when you don't load them with repetitive tasks or something
Hmm.
of duty, you just create the space in your brain that is able to spend the resource
Yeah.
on creative work, let's say it like that.
There
I
is.
have a
Mhm.
question. I'm
Yeah.
not sure that I do really understand that what is creative work. Well,
To
I
me,
mean, painting pictures is definitely creative, and
mhm,
but in other, points of work, fields of work, I'm not sure that I understand.
I would
Is
say that
is
creative work is to create, let's say, an architecture for the future, let us say so. So if we have an incoming batch of information describing clients' wishes and clients' needs and clients' something else, a non-functional requirement and functional requirement, we have lots of different streams of information coming to our head. We need to process this information, to analyze, to split it into bits, and to synthesize something new, knowing our limitations and our constraints of our technical stuff and our team processes, etc. So then we create something rationally or half rationally, and this is, to me, creative work.
Yeah, yeah,
Here,
yeah. Can I share my opinion? So I would say that creative work is just an opposite to the thing that you understand how to do. So
Exactly.
yeah, when you have an algorithm or just a sequence of steps that you need to take to achieve the task, this is a non-creative work, nothing to invent here. But if you don't understand how to solve the problem, you need at least a bit of creativity to, come up with something. So maybe you need some more information, or you need to take a walk, or something else, but you need to create
Exactly.
something new.
I
This is
have a
very
question
important
here.
here. So just one second,
Oh,
Pasha. This is
yeah.
very important here, that walking or playing music or going to the gym or having something to eat or something else creates diversity in our brain. And this diversity actually can trigger some different neural path to emerge. And that is, I think, the recipe for proper creative work.
Yeah, but what I wanted to say that is that I have some experience in architect roles. Like I wasn't a solution architect or system architect or anything like that. Yeah, I was like team lead, but of course, architecture of features was part of my work. But for me, it was always non-creative work by your definition, because I had to gather all information I can gather. Then I had to,
Mhm.
um, write it somewhere, put it some way in the, create system from this information, and then I should analyze this information, and then I can, just I don't even need to find to invent something new. I can just Google, because at some point of in time I begin to understand my constraints, and
Mhm.
then I can Google. I have such and such constraint. I have these opportunities. What
Mhm.
should I do? And then, knowing my limitations, constraints, and so on, I can just choose from what's there on internet.
I
Is it
think you're mentioning the situation where your level of expertness, the expertness level,
expertise?
expertise level was higher than the level of uncertainty. Because we are talking about creative work, which I think deals with higher level of uncertainties. For example, I haven't been doing JavaScript for almost 5 years, and it would be hard for me to create architecture, even though I remember pretty much everything that I've been doing then. But anyway, it would be hard for me. The level of uncertainty will be higher than I can process right now. And then I have to do some creative work. I have to create something in my mind, have to process the information, analyze and synthesize something new. You mentioned, I think, something different, a case where you just needed to do routine action, almost to collect information, to uh,
Analyze it.
analyze
uh,
it a bit. Yeah.
yeah, and then to generate some solution.
Hmm.
If for me, and I tend to think that it's correct for almost any IT field. And you're saying that you say that you wouldn't be able to create an architecture. I actually
Instantly.
don't believe it,
Instantly,
because
I wouldn't.
but I don't really believe, because they didn't invent anything new this 5 years. You
Maybe.
have all you need in your head. Maybe it won't be the perfect solution, but there are no perfect solutions in the world. So your solution will be at least acceptable.
Maybe you're
Don't you
right.
think
Maybe
so?
maybe you're right. Maybe the example wasn't good because I had some expertise there. So yes, maybe I still possess it in my head, and maybe would be able to create some new architecture for a certain thing. Maybe, I don't know. What I'm saying is that I think there are two parts of the ways, two ways that we need to balance. One is the level of uncertainty where we don't possess enough information, and we either gain it from the client or from the user or from peers or from someone else. We process it, and then we map what we've processed against our system, against our technical stuff. And we here trying to connect two worlds, something that came from a person, from a human being, and something that we have in our technical, in the technical system. We create this new social technical something. And I think this is
Are you
creative.
saying that? Are you basically saying that setting a deadlines kills creativity because people are forced to work on the same problem without creating those diversity in their minds and without proper time for looking for other solutions or maybe something else?
I think it hurts. I can't prove it though. It is just my, I don't know, my thoughts and my experience with that, an experience of teams that I worked with. So that I tend to follow this very simple thinking process where I tell the guys or tell myself, you have one day, let's say, for gathering and understanding and investigation and getting more information, reducing the level of uncertainty. Then you need to come up with something. Maybe it is that I cannot do this with my level of
one day
expertise.
is already but one day is already a deadline, isn't it?
Then I will tell my manager, if I am the developer, that the risk that I will commit something of lesser quality than expected is high, and then it's his risk, not mine.
Well, regarding the deadlines affecting the cognitive ability and the results, I actually believe that deadline creates a feeling of fear. And when you fear, afraid of something, then the level of cortisol goes higher.
Yeah.
And thus directly affects the brain and the cognitive ability.
Yeah, you tend to have escape. They call it escape strategy. So you would rather do something of a very bad quality, but that would fit the criteria, the acceptance criteria, and then you
mean
will
formal
forget about
criteria,
it.
right?
Yeah, formal criteria.
Formal
Yes.
criterion.
So your goal shifts from making the client happy to making the deadline happy, which is, I think, wrong.
Yeah, but here we can set up a new humanistic question.
Pasha.
So Pasha is frozen, not only for me but for you as well, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Pasha,
I'm
hello.
sorry. No, am I
That's all
back?
right.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Scrum is all about setting 2-week or 1-week deadlines, right? And we should do something. We should come up with something until the end of Scrum.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yes,
Is it
you have
how
you
it
have to hit
intended to work?
the goal of the sprint. Yes.
Vladimir, what do you think? Does it fit our idea?
Yeah, that's why you don't say that this is absolutely required. So you're just creating. Well, one thing that you need to do in Scrum is that, sorry for that, is actually prepare some work so that it is in the state that is ready for development. So the goal of the sprint is to understand how much of this work you need to prepare, because we have pull systems and they work better than push systems.
No.
So
Yep.
Hold on. Scrum Guide tells you that you take the commitment during sprint planning to achieve the sprint goal, and you only have two options: either to achieve the sprint goal or to close the sprint before it is finished if requirements change, let's say. So you always have a deadline by the end of the sprint.
Let's say it like that. I don't believe in Scrum Guide. So
Good.
I always adopt it. So and
Yeah.
get rid of the things that I believe are not working. So sprint goal is good, but it's more like an intention and not a commitment. So
I always use focus. That's a good thing.
Yeah. Focus. So we're improving the
Focus,
solution
nice.
towards something. For example, we can have a sprint that is focused on the performance of the whole system.
Yeah.
So yeah, focus is a much better word than
Yeah,
commitment.
direction maybe even better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
even direction.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. What
Yeah,
I also
but
Mhm.
is there really any mental difference between hard commitment and soft commitment? Like for hard commitment, don't as developer, what do I feel when I say that we are trying to fix something? Okay, formally, I'm not obligated to fix it or to implement
Yes,
it,
you're
but in
right.
my mind, I will always think about such task, and still will think about it in in terms of time constraint, not about
And
achieving
commitment
this
and
goal,
promise.
but
Yes, yes.
trying to achieve this goal
Well,
in certain time frame. Doesn't it break
exactly.
the creativity?
To, to me it does. To me it does, because you like there is a good observation that whenever someone comes to Agile Scrum chat, first question he or she asks, I'm using Scrum, we're not hitting sprint goals, we're not hitting our deadlines. So this the way how Scrum Guide, I think, formulated all these concepts, made people think, made managers, weak managers or uneducated managers think that we have 2 weeks deadline, 2 weeks deadline. And then they have issues with overutilization when they try to push as much stuff into the sprint so that analysts don't have enough time. QA engineers don't have enough time. DBA is sitting somewhere crying, and, and software developers are doing something like playing almost planning Tetris inside the sprint to fit everything. And I've heard many stories when people were they saying crunching when they were doing hard work overtime work every Friday because either they are prepping for the next sprint or doing something else, and then they are fed up with meetings because even though they might understand the value of certain meetings, they have work pushing them in the back trying to they want to do it on time.
Yeah, and this is, I think, is a great strategy of Scrum, because actually the idea was to reduce the feedback loop,
Mhm.
right? To
Yeah.
know better what you're doing,
Mhm.
and it's like
Good goal.
transformed into
Yeah.
some ritual of crunching the developers and
Yeah.
making everything wrong that
Mhm.
can be made wrong. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I think this small iteration idea was really good. I mean, the Scrum was invented, as far as I understand, to mitigate the problem of projects where the increment and the iteration was like half a year or a year or 2 years. So faster feedback cycle and feedback loop is generally a very good idea. But now we have concepts like CI/CD, let's say, where a developer can push value to the client instantly, all the time, every time. So my developers, for example, in my company, we push whenever we want. Whenever something is ready, it goes to the clients. And that's, I think, much better. So then we get rid of the time constraints
It
whatsoever.
is. It is, but here we hit another trouble. We hit the trouble of perfectionists. There are people who don't even consider that the task is already good, implemented good enough.
Mhm.
They want more and more time, and for
Yeah.
such people, time constraints could be really helpful, right?
Yes. And this is where I think the concept that Phil Delgado published in his talk or described in his talk, the concept of design review comes in really handy. It's same as New Okr in Russian plans, where you do some research first, you plan your stuff, you specify the level of quality that you must achieve. Like, okay, these are functional, non-functional requirements that I must satisfy. This is the design I came up with. I've spent 2 days, I planned the feature, and now I'm just executing my plan for the next 5 days. There is a risk, a small risk that something might go wrong. Of course, it might. Okay. But anyway, if the plan is shared between people, there is no room for over perfection here, I think. Because if a person just goes wild to some, I don't know, refactoring everything everywhere, it's simple. We say, okay, that is your plan. Why haven't you followed it?
Yeah,
That's why we have stand-up meetings, because you ask, hey, how are you doing, and the person is like, well, I started the refactoring. What?
Mm,
What
I,
refactoring?
I don't consider this a good option, just because you are pulling information from people, and pulling doesn't scale really well. I use this approach
I
where
know, I
guys
know.
push. Yeah. But again, daily meetings are quite a well tool for certain teams. For example, I had one case where I installed daily meetings in the worst possible way, a status report meeting. Why I did that? Simple, because the manager was anal. He actually was like kind of bad guy, let's say, and he wanted to maintain control of everything. So I gave him this illusion of control that these daily meetings will actually do something for him. So, and he was tricked into that, and he was observing the team, and everyone was saying, oh, it's all right, it's doing good, or there is a problem, let's solve it. We solved it. And this minor meeting was a replacement for a severe status system that we had, where statuses were constantly being pushed to him. So yeah, every tool might be used sometimes.
What I wanted to say is that um, I don't really believe that design review will stop you from over perfecting your work. In
Why?
if you don't have any little detail scrutinously described, you will find some way to write it better. I have some small method in my business logics. It contains 5 lines
Mhm,
of code. There is always some place for improvement. Perform improvement in terms of code style, performance, anything else. My client will not, well, my consumer will not actually care about performance or even code style. My team may care about code style, but usually we can enforce some code style with linters, and it's
mhm,
actually what we should do to reduce
mhm. Load, yeah.
cognitive load to perform analysis of your code style. But some people will really try to over perfect each line of code, and it's an issue.
I rarely saw people like that. It's interesting. I rarely saw people like that. I saw once,
Oh,
but the developer was
I
doing
was such a person.
An Italian strike to the management, saying that, okay, before I get all the possible requirements from you, I won't finish the task. But that was Italian strike. So that wasn't a normal
Yeah,
routine.
This
I
is
was such
actually a
kind of
cultural
person.
problem because we had something like that like half a year ago, and when I came to the team, I said, "Hey, people, we're a team together working towards common goal. So we're not like pointing fingers or whatever. We're working
Mhm,
together. So please, if you need any bit of information, just go request them.
mhm.
But don't insist on a formal technical specification.
Specification, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm,
because it doesn't bring value.
yeah.
Value is brought by a product, a ready product. So you need to put your communication into figure out how to implement it,
Yeah.
and that works.
I agree here. I constantly explain this idea of the team result primate. So we are there to provide a result as a team. Otherwise, we wouldn't be assembled to a team. We would be just
Well,
separate developers sitting somewhere else.
of course, it's not. It's not usual, but I've seen formal teams which contained
Mhm.
like seven individual contributors. They were assembled to team just for their manager to
Ah,
to have some formal unit. Of
okay.
course, they were not a real team. They were
Mhm.
separate
A group.
individuals who were contributing their own huge effort into the
Mhm.
product. I
Mhm.
mean, nothing bad there. It's just formal thing.
Yeah. Yeah, but then again, they won't do a team result. So if
Yeah,
we have
absolutely.
a product team, then yes, we are together, formed
Yeah,
together to a team to achieve some team result. And then, of
yeah,
course,
absolutely.
there is this approach that you try to increase the certainty level in your features, and then everyone will help you. Otherwise, well, the team should be disassembled, or the
Yeah,
manager
maybe.
should be, should be punished.
I I'm not sure about punishing people.
I'm joking. I'm joking. Of course,
My, my,
punishment is the same as fear. If you have, I mean, there is this great concept of blameless responsibility or blameless teams. We've discussed it so many times that if you have individuals and teams trying to, um, like, generally work together, if you punish at least any one of them, then very bad social dynamics will start. People
yeah,
will talk about it after a ciggy or after a lunch, and things
yeah,
will go south.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and the next thing they will ask themselves, who's next?
Yeah,
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 absolutely.
that is true, and that is why I don't like performance reviews as well.
But I just wanted to say that I'm this kind of person I was this kind of person who was
Hmm.
ever perfecting everything
Hmm.
without any real sense. I just thought that okay, like my way of thinking was like this. I am senior software engineer. I
Hmm.
should show example of what is the best possible way to write something.
Hmm.
And if I can see the room for improvement in my code, other people will see it too. And it means that maybe I'm not a senior and maybe I'm not showing example. And I think that we have something like this in our culture. Like we always should, get A marks in school because otherwise our parents will be unhappy and so on. I'm not
Hmm.
sure about roots of this thing,
I have
but
I have a hypothesis that we had revolution than World War II, so we had two situations where the country had to be reassembled, recreated, almost reconfigured, and that required so much effort that the heroic approach was required for that. I think that's the case. I mean, after the Second World War, the whole country was rebuilt. Seriously, everything was rebuilt, and my granddad worked used to work for 16 hours a day, and he did it voluntarily because he wanted to do that. And these are, I think, the roots. I mean, heroism still is a valuable thing in our culture, at work, even though I consider heroism a red flag at work. It's a bad process smell.
Yeah,
yeah,
this is
absolutely.
the same thing I'm telling to my teams is that hey people, stop overworking. You're not doing good
Mhm.
for anybody, neither the business nor yourself. Please stop doing it. The best thing is that we can work calmly according to our work schedule, and thus we will be approaching the best results. So if somebody is not working, that we need to adjust the processes,
Yeah,
not your hours. So
exactly. And if you
Working
work
time.
overtime, you won't see the issues in the process. If you're covering the issues with your heroism, you're doing a bad job for the team, because people will first follow
exactly.
you,
And
try
for
to
the
follow you,
company
and
actually.
then you won't see the issues. Yeah.
Yeah, but by the way, speaking about overtime, um it sets the idea that there is some time and then there is overtime. But I'm not sure that this is how it should work in development. I'm not
I
sure that
agree.
people should really work for 8 hours or 4 hours or 9 hours a day. I believe that usually people should work as long as they can be productive. Like
I
for
fully
many of
agree.
us, it's two
Yeah.
hours a day, maybe.
You
I'm
know.
not even sure about 2 hours a day. Some period of time which is comfortable for you. It
Mhm.
won't overload you. It won't overload your brain. But it's very hard to implement when you have to work in office. Currently, we live in pandemic or some say post-pandemic world, and it's
Mhm.
easier because we work at home. Still, somebody wants us to be online and to be available for at least 8 hours a day or 12 hours a day because we have different time zones. In my team, people communicate 24 hours a day because we have advocates spread all over the world.
Mhm.
But of course, you know it's not what I should
Possible.
what I should do.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't have
yeah,
to
And
be
it's
I,
in
I
this
I
in those
agree
tasks.
on the the hours of productivity. Because, for
Mhm.
example, when I feel exhausted at 6 p.m. and I started working even at 11, I'm just, I will stop. Like,
Yeah.
what's the reason to like spend in front of the computer and procrastinate if I can
Yeah.
go have a good rest, and then maybe at 11 p.m., which happens rather frequently, I can like sit down, spend 15 minutes, solve a task, and feel like, yeah, I
Yeah,
accomplished
yeah,
that.
yeah. It's very common thing in my family. I'm sitting behind the screen at 12 a.m. My wife comes and says, Pasha, it's late already. I think you wanna, watch some TV shows or maybe go sleep. I say I can't. It's such an interesting task, and I
Mhm.
feel that I'm already there. There's something I have something small to fix, and of
Mhm.
course I can't fix it. And the next day I wake up at 8 a.m. and I need really 10 minutes to fix the thing.
Yeah. That's
Real
very
10 minutes.
interesting. That's very interesting here that we rationally think that it's a good idea to stop, and yet it is very hard sometimes to stop. I think that our managers, if we are managers, our managers' duty to create a system, a socio-technical system, and processes and atmosphere where overtime is frowned upon, where working more than a certain period of time is considered something bad for you and bad for the team. Thus, it will somehow motivate, maybe it will motivate people to consider their day duties, to consider the time they spend. Because yeah, I'm fully support this idea that we should work when we are productive. But this concept of we are productive or not productive now is heavily influenced by is going on in the team. If the whole team is working overtime and I'm going for a walk, I will think bad of me. I will think, oh, Vitaly,
Yeah,
you're a bad
yeah,
person. You're
yeah.
doing
Actually,
something bad for the team. Everyone is working hard and you're such a lazy guy. Go work. And this is bad. So, yeah, I think managers can do a very good job here of actually making sure almost that people don't overwork and then creating a comforting and comfortable environment for asynchronous work, which is very important in our COVID world. I've read an article from GitLab where they almost advertised how they set up this async work, where they had a case of an engineer who goes cycling or something else in the morning, then works a few hours, then goes, does something else with his family, then comes back and works for another 3 or 4 hours. And that's okay for them because their processes allow proper information flow even in an asynchronous way, which is in the architecture very hard and in the process even harder.
yeah, it's hard to imagine such work when you need to have lots of synchronous contacts with people. At GitLab, when you're a developer, you don't have to. But when you're a manager, it's very hard not to have synchronous contacts because you have customers and you have other managers. You should coordinate your plans sometimes. Invent something about your strategy and so on. And it's all the things I believe are synchronous by nature. Because yeah, coordination should be synchronous. I can't imagine
But
I
then
think
I
coordination
think
of people.
that many of these events that you're mentioning can be just ditched. I think that there might be much less generally coordination and more trust and things like that. So I think you are describing the status quo of the processes rather than the better world that we can live in. And Pasha, you disappeared. You've disappeared. Wake up, Pasha.
Yeah, that happens to Pasha. I thought it would happen to me, but
Pasha, come back. Comrade Pasha.
I think he's using cell data for for the
I'm,
connection.
I'm actually using cell
Or
data.
or
Yeah, I have
maybe
this
or
photo.
maybe I believe Pasha is using his mobile phone for the camera. Maybe it just overheated.
Or he wanted async communication with us.
Yeah, I think podcast. I think
Yeah,
that's the next breakdown idea. So I think
yeah.
podcast.
like record a bit of podcast, send it to a peer. He records a reply. You sends it back.
Yeah, and
But
you spent like half a year to spend an episode.
yeah, and then
Sorry,
it will
folks.
be very hard. It will be very hard to retain the context in your mind if you send bits and bobs. So yeah, some synchronization, of course, must be happening synchronously because we human beings have our speech and language working synchronously. We can't do it properly async. So yeah, and also there's a very interesting thing about this new medium, the new set of medium that we use. We use Zoom and we use phone calls and we use emails, and they are, I think, much less effective in terms of the information transfer rather than proper peer-to-peer communication in real life. Even culturally, it's very hard. Like this effect that in the chats in the internet, people can be much ruder to each other rather than in person. I mean, seriously, we are rational beings living in the 21st century, and yet we are like really rude sometimes to peers in chats. So I mean, I'm
What?
really surprised.
This is well. Wait a second. This is completely unrational. First of all, you're being rude. Second, there's a written proof of that. So why?
I mean, I
Uh,
think that's just because we think. I mean, we don't see the person, we don't smell the person, we don't feel the person, we don't. How to say? I think this presence of a human being close to you brings kind of respect, not respect, something, fear, respect, something, some social construct that we bear in
I
mind.
would call it feel of human next to
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
Feeling
yeah,
of
yeah.
human,
So
not
that,
feel, of
yeah,
course.
I mean, I even tend to notice that I can have more conflicts with my partner when we text, and they escalate much worse compared to when we are together, sitting close to each other. This is very interesting. I think that's because we don't have this human, yeah, in the phone.
Yeah, but what about this always be nice thing? So shouldn't be like implemented by everybody, no?
It's not
It
typical for
should.
Russian culture.
It's first
Yeah.
this, yes, but then it's very hard sometimes. There are different mm, levels of hormones in people. I tend to be overreacting most of the times. I learned how to dial down this, but still, I know that it's boiling inside sometimes. I have to control myself. There are different scenarios, and I mean, I think it's just harder in the internet because in the
Um,
real life, it's easier.
I wanted to say that there is a book called The Culture Map, the breaking
Mhm,
through the invisible boundaries of global business, and it's book by Erin Meyer. I will post a link in the private chat right now, and maybe
mhm,
Vitaly will post it in blog
mhm.
or somewhere
Thank
else.
you.
It's an awesome book, and it says that actually Russians are one of the most confrontational confrontational people in the world.
Interesting.
Israelis are on par with them, but
Hmm.
in Japan you would never hit this conflict, direct conflict between
Hmm.
people. They can think something, but they will
Mm.
never say.
So
Uh,
their culture influences them to behave in a much more, I wouldn't say civilized, much more polite way.
yeah, it will.
Mm. Interesting.
And for
So
Americans,
it means,
it's the same,
so it means that we,
It has its own consequences, though.
of course,
yeah. So
of
then
course.
we, as team leads or managers, can. It means that we can influence the culture in our teams so that the culture is better, more polite, right? I
Yeah,
mean, if the country can have different culture
yeah,
of communication.
folks. We are heavily off topic and actually
Yeah,
out of time,
yeah,
because we have soft deadline of 1 hour
yep,
to fit in. Yeah, yeah. Of course, we don't have it because we want to remain creative. But
yeah.
I would like, Vitaly, you to summarize what we came to.
Uh, what's important for me in this discussion, what was important for me in this discussion, is the understanding that time should be I mean, time being a constraint should be rationalized. We should think if time is really a constraint in each scenario, in each case. And I think, and my experience shows, that in most cases, time isn't a constraint, but mental capacity or tiredness or context switch, amount of context switch is a constraint. And if we work with our system in a way and adopt this system in a way so that we reduce those we remove those constraints or we reduce the amount of time they occur, then our guys, our peers, and our team members can be more productive.
Yeah,
I agree.
would agree.
Good.
And
Thank you,
that's
guys.
a good finish.
Pasha, yes?
That's a good finish for this episode, I believe.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. It was nice
Thank
to
you,
have
Vitaly.
you.
Thanks, Pasha. See you later. Bye.
Thanks, folks. See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.